Welcome to Australia's Pioneering Saints, true stories from the earliest days of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Australia. Today's episode, When Faith Looks Like Failure. What if the mission you call a failure is actually your greatest success? After sailing halfway around the world, a young man soon vanished from the official church records, only to resurface decades later in the most improbable fashion. His name was William James Barratt, and for over a century his story appeared to be one of quiet defeat. In 1989 I published an article in BYU Studies exploring his life. After being set apart as the first missionary to Australia in 1840, he soon vanished from church records. When we talk about pioneer faith, don't we usually picture triumph, miracles, stories that end in glory? But sometimes real faith is quieter. Sometimes it looks like failure. That's the story of William James Barratt and how his supposed failure became one of the most far-reaching successes in early Australian church history. Picture this. It's 1840. William's just 17 years old when he leaves England. Elder George A. Smith recorded that they ordained William Barratt to the office of elder and gave him instructions preparatory to his mission. Just picture the weight of that. A teenager officially entrusted to carry the gospel halfway around the world. Before sailing, William wrote to his mission leader, declaring a fixed faith and strong resolution. "I have felt the importance and the power of my office, and I will meet you at the journey's end, bringing my new converts with me." But reality in the colony of South Australia was much more harsh. William tried to preach, but few would listen. Months later his tone shifted. He wrote home, "The people seem wholly determined to reject my testimony. I have not baptized any. Surely there are few saints in this place." That letter took 8 months to reach England, and yet, even as William wrote those discouraging words, something notable was unfolding. In 1841, while working in a shepherd's camp at Mount Barker, he met Robert Beauchamp, a pious immigrant who originally intended to save the young Mormon from his errors. Instead, the teenager's convictions won. William baptized Beauchamp, the very first convert baptism in Australia. But here's where the story turns. The reality of William Barratt wasn't a lack of converts. It was a total loss of momentum and support. In late 1844, the devastating news of Joseph and Hiram's death finally reached Australia. Imagine being thousands of miles from the centre of your faith and hearing that your leadership had been killed and the structure you represent has dissolved into chaos. To William, in his isolation, the light hadn't just flickered, it had been extinguished by the tyranny of distance. His decision to settle down, marry, and join his wife's local church wasn't simply a lapse in faith. It was a logical human response to geographical isolation. William became a farmer and a preacher, living a good life, but completely unaware that the seed he had planted at the shepherd's camp was still growing in the dark. For 25 years, Barratt was lost, but his convert, Robert Beauchamp, who later went by Robert Beauchamp Dolling, never forgot. Even with no missionaries or fellowship for an entire decade, Dolling held on to what William Barratt had taught him. In the early 1850s, missionaries found Dolling in Tasmania. His faith hadn't faded, it had grown stronger. What happened next reveals the true harvest. Dolling immigrated to Utah, but was quickly called back to his homeland as the Australian mission president. Under Dolling's leadership, from 1868 to 1874, foundational branches were organised across both Australia and New Zealand. What began in a shepherd's camp became structure, stability, permanence. The reach of Dolling's leadership is most vividly seen in the conversion of Ebenezer de Vries and John Miles. In early 1873, the ship England was in Sydney. While docked, Ebenezer and John were walking down a street near the harbour when they came upon a crowd gathered around Robert Beauchamp and his companion, singing hymns and preaching. Intrigued, they stayed to talk, and John purchased the Book of Mormon. After reading through the night, John testified of the book's truth to Ebenezer. John was baptized on March 30, 1873. Ebenezer followed on April 6. Ebenezer and John later used their maritime skills to help rig the heavy machinery required to place the massive baptismal font in the St. George Temple in Utah. But the impact would be measured in generations. When we consider the dimensions of just one or two converts like Devitry and Miles, we see how they changed the destiny of thousands. Ebenezer alone went on to have 13 children, and today his posterity numbers in the thousands. The circle expanded past Utah. Ebenezer Devitry eventually returned to England as a missionary to convert his family, replanting seeds in the very soil William Barratt had left decades earlier. This wasn't a one-way trip, it was a global loop. Barratt died in 1889, likely viewing his mission through the lens of failure. He never knew his efforts produced a mission president and a harvest spanning 3 continents. His letters spoke of defeat, yet he had started a global ripple. Think of Abinadi, mocked and burned alive with no visible converts. But one priest named Alma was listening. Whether it's a prophet like Abinadi or a lonely teenager like Barratt, faithful efforts are never wasted. And if you feel prompted to reach out to someone or to share a kind word, do it. You might not see the harvest for 25 years or even in this lifetime, but your task isn't to see the end of the chain. It's simply to be a strong link.